Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Our speaker today is Naga. He's been a member of the Western Buddhist Order for 5 years. He was born in Scotland, and he is taught at the London Buddhist Center. He's specializing in teaching, leading retreats for gay men. He also works in a cafe which is run as a Buddhist right livelihood business. He's recently had a short regular slot on BBC Radio, sharing Buddhist ideas. He's also starred in a Buddhist gay fringe theater production in London, in drag, playing Madame Yaya. Naga.
Well, thank you very much, Larry. Yes. A couple of warnings before I start. I am Scottish, so I have an accent. When I went to first live in England in 1986, and England is definitely a different country from Scotland, I had to slow right down the way that I spoke, and I had to learn to enunciate very clearly because the English couldn't understand my accent. So I have an accent, and also Scottish people speak very, very quickly. So we've got a lot to do, and it's very cold in Scotland, so we don't want to hang around chatting. So if you don't understand me and I get too fast, do let me know. So I'm actually here in San Francisco on holiday at the moment. Not, of course, that it is or are any holidays in the spiritual life. And when I was coming over, Parma Bodhi, who lives upstairs, comes and stays in the house that I stay in London, and he comes over quite regularly. I used to live in a community with him years ago, and he kept saying, come to San Francisco. And I was like, I can't come to San Francisco. It's too far away. And I work in a right livelihood, which means we don't earn very much money. So the whole idea of coming abroad was a bit sort of mad. In January, I live in a small community at the moment. It's just me. It's a very alternative community in the London Buddhist mandala. I call it a mixed community because there's myself. I am a practicing homosexual. There is Lassiter, who's a women order member, and there's Mokshabandhu, who's a male order member. And they're a couple. So I'm living, this is all in the sort of FWO, this is enough to make your hair stand on end. I'm living with a couple who are in a sexual relationship with each other, and it's mixed, so there's men and women there. So it might not be very shocking to hear, but for the London Buddhist sort of mandala, it's scandalous. And also the fact that we're all order members, there's no like beginners or what we call mitras in the community, so it's just us. We don't have to do any teaching. Up until recently, I was living in a men's community, which is much more the thing to do, above the London Buddhist Centre. I lived there for 6 years, and it was with 14 men, and that was interesting. And I've just recently moved to living with them. So Mokshabandhu's got a real job. He doesn't work in right livelihood, so he's got a real job. So we've got Sky Television, which is another scandal. We've got Sky Television, and at the beginning of the year I was watching National Geographic, and there's a whole, what am I talking about? There's this whole programme all about beaches and forests and the world, and I just suddenly thought, I'm going to die at some point. I want to see what is actually out there. I've never really done much travelling because I always, my rationale was I didn't see any point in being depressed in a foreign country. I thought I might as well be depressed in familiar surroundings. So I'd always been why I'd never really done much travelling really. But I decided at the beginning of the year, I think I must be getting happier. I'm not sure. But I decided at the beginning of the year that I should start to travel. The other thing being that I think you get really used to being in your own conditions, and conditions do have a very strong effect on you. This is a whole bit of the Buddhist teaching. Conditions have such an effect on you. You take lots of things for granted, the whole way you're spoken to, the culture around about you, what it mirrors. And I suddenly thought I'd like to start going to places which were completely different to the culture that I grew up in or was used to get an idea of my own fixed self-view. So San Francisco seemed far enough away for that, and also you speak English. So that's how I kind of got here. Financially, I did it by saying it was a retreat. So I got... I'm here on retreat, so I get 6 weeks retreat allowance, you see. So this is 2 weeks retreat allowance to come to San Francisco. So as soon as I emailed Parama Bodhi and said I was coming to San Francisco, he emailed straight back and said, "Do you want to give a talk?" And I was like, "Oh no," because, as Larry said, I'm primarily a meditation teacher, which means I get to do 1 or 2 words with lots of pauses. Which I like doing, because in England, my voice is seen to be very soothing and relaxing. In Glasgow, it's like a huge neon sign saying "I am gay." It's called effeminate. But in England, they find it very soothing. And also, Scottish accents are the most popular accents in advertising at the moment in Britain because they are very trustworthy. Because we sound as if we mean what we say. So I can't remember what the preamble to that was. But anyway, so giving a talk, as I say, it's not something I do a lot of. Because I've only really got one subject. I was talking to Paramananda about this, and he was giving a talk here at Tuesday class, and he was saying it's really weird that he's given so many talks, but actually thinks it's the same talk that he gives over and over and over again. It just comes at it from a slightly different angle. And I do the same. I give the same talk over and over again. I'm hoping it's going to be slightly different today. So I emailed back to Parama Bodhi and I said, "Well, who is it you want me to speak to?" Because I thought it would be FWBO, which is Friends of the Western Buddhist Order, which is in-house, so I can use all the FWBO jargon and lots of nodding, and you can say certain phrases and people will understand you because we use the same terminology. And he wrote back and said it was gay Buddhists. That didn't mean anything to me. So... And that was all he would give me. He wouldn't give me any other information really about you. He said you were very, very nice. That's collectively, as one being. He sees you as one being, and you're all very, very nice. So it started me thinking about, what to talk about, because instantly I just felt insecure. I thought, oh my God, I'll probably get there and they'll all be really, really real Buddhists, and they'll probably all be sitting really quietly, and there'll be experts in Tibet or Zen, so I kind of got further and further into this hole of who am I? I am who I'm nothing. Always an excuse for a musical song to come on. So I then started to think about, definition of terms. Sangharakshita, the founder of the Western Buddhist Order, is very keen on making sure that you are clear about your terms. It's painful at times when you read some of his books, because the preamble to the book can go on for pages till it just gets clear to you what he's actually talking about. I am talking about this, I am not talking about that, this. So that what he's actually trying to do is to communicate. And it's really important, I always find with the stuff there is that he gets you to understand what he's actually talking about. So I thought what I'd talk about is, what is a Buddhist? So from my teaching, the sort of tradition I follow, which is the Western Buddhist Order, what I've been taught a Buddhist is, and it could be completely odds with what you think, but it's a kind of I'm Coming Out, which is another song. It's just a way of introducing, what I believe a Buddhist is. Okay? So, I've done my talk by illustration this time, so it can take me hours to decipher it. Right. So what is a Buddhist. Now, when I first went along to the Glasgow Buddhist Centre in 1984, I mean, I didn't know anything about Buddhism at all. I mean, Scotland, I hadn't even, I didn't know what Buddhist was. I'd met the Sri Chinmoy, and I'd gone to their centre once, but I didn't quite get off on that. Because I got involved in Buddhism primarily because of a poster. I was working as a graphic designer in Glasgow at the time. I was running my own studio. I had a long white trench coat and very long hair, and I walked very quickly in the wind all the time with a portfolio. And I was stoned most of the time, and I'd got into my head somewhere that meditation made you more creative. Okay, this was very important to me because I wanted to be very creative as a graphic designer. And I saw this poster outside the Glasgow Buddhist Centre, and it had an egg on it. It was in black and white, which was pretty cool. Black and white, egg, and it just said on top of it, "Break out." And I thought, oh, as a graphic designer, I thought, this is really good. So I thought, I want to find out, who did that poster. I also have to say, at that point, I had read Shogun. Which is when people go into about what inspired them into Buddhism. I was going, I read Shogun, which is kind of Japanesey, kind of sort of Zen-y, kind of sort of, I had a sort of feel of kung fu and things like that. It's discipline. That was the only thing I knew, about Buddhism. And I went along to the Glasgow Buddhist Centre. And I think in retrospect, I realised that I think what I thought Buddhists would be is they'd kind of be like nicer Christians. I just basically thought they'd be Christian. It'd be another religion, basically. You join up, set of rules, there'll be the look, and, just be like nicer Christians, really. I suppose implied in that, I'm not saying that Christians aren't nice, but I have to just come from my experience as being brought up as a Catholic, that I hadn't really had a very positive experience of the Catholic faith. So I met these people, and they were just like blokes, really. They were just people, It didn't do much. They had this big Buddha in the middle of this really ugly Buddha in the middle of the room. And what I liked was the fact that people were willing to say that about it. It was kind of like they'd kind of been given it, so we get it out. But it was sort of like, because what they were trying to get to all the time was the essence of what was going on. They didn't seem to be caught up in the way things looked. It served a purpose, and that was important to them. A couple of things about it was the first time I'd come across people who made direct eye contact. It might be different in the States, but in Scotland you don't make direct eye contact. If you ever go to London, don't make direct eye contact, especially not in the underground. And I went with a girlfriend, because we were both chic designers, although she was much shorter than me. And we went there, and my strongest impression was standing within tea break having a cup of tea, and one of these people with these on would come in, and you kind of feel their eyes kind of coming round the room. There was a programme in Britain called Captain Scarlet. I don't know if you got it over here. It's puppets, and there are these things called the Misterons. And you never ever saw them. All you ever saw were these 2-car headlamps that did that. And that's what it was like. They looked around the room and they kind of made eye contact with you. You'd be standing, you'd be caught in their gaze. You kind of go, I'm being looked at, and then they kind of move on again. And it was a really bizarre phenomenon to be actually just taken in. And to get a sense that it wasn't necessarily contractual. It was not aggressive. They didn't want to have. Being gay, I have to say, I was quite used to making eye contact, especially with men. I knew how to do it really quickly. But it was unusual to have people actually taking me in. So it was a very sort of ordinary contact. There wasn't anything very sort of exotic or special or spiritual. It was just a very ordinary contact. They were just very ordinary people kind of get on with something. And I hung about a bit with them, and then I lost interest in it. So after several false starts, I did get more involved in the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order. And I think, like a lot of people, I was basically looking for something to join. I was looking for lots of rules. And one of the things that I found very interesting about the way Sangharakshita, who's the founder of the movement, kind of went at the spiritual life was that it wasn't caught up in the lifestyle. He says is secondary, commitment is primary. That does not mean to say that your lifestyle is not important, but actually your commitment is the most important thing. And he says that amongst all the different traditions, when you take all the different traditions, which there are a lot about nowadays, you take them right down, and what they have at the centre of all of them is the act of going for refuge. That's terminology which is very common in the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order. I don't know how common it is with other groups, but he talks very much about going for refuge. That in life, what we're doing is we're constantly going to for refuge to various things to find safety or security. And the act of committing yourself to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha is to find refuge in something which is a true refuge. Okay? So it's something that actually is a place of safety. And in that sense, taking that on is, from the Buddha's experience, is the path of enlightenment. So traditionally how that would happen in the times of the Buddha was that the Buddha would be walking about in the countryside, collecting his alms, and he would just meet people. And they would ask him for teachings. And these teachings might be very short, very long. He might do them as verse. Sometimes he gave a teaching in silence. There's a famous story where he just actually lifted up a flower and someone understood the teaching and became what we call a stream entrant. And one of the stories which has always struck me very strongly as a very universal story, when the Buddha did meet people, he met people from all walks of life, the rich, the poor, men, women. He just met people and he responded to them as he met them. And there's a traditional story of one woman that he met. I don't know if you know the story. It's about a woman called Kisagotami. And in India, there is a different caste system. In the main Hindu religion, there's a caste system. Below the 5 main castes, there are the castes of the untouchables. So these are thousands of people born into that caste who are called untouchable. And it means that if they touch you, you are then spoiled. Below them, there are other castes. There are castes that are actually called the unseeables. That if they actually come into your line of vision, they soil you. And so these people are given the lowest of the low jobs. These people are basically told that you're born into that, and that's it. You have to work. You have to live and die in that state. And if you can work through and purify yourself, well, in your next rebirth, you might be born again. And so within that system, there's a woman called Kisagotami. And there's a very, I don't know much about the Indian system, but there's a very strong sort of family network. And it's very important to have boys. Boys are very important. Kisagotami starts off in the story as a single woman. She gets married and she tries to have a child. She can't have a child, and her mother-in-law hates her for this because she's not bringing any merit to the family, because she's not having a child. Eventually she gives birth to a boy. So Kisagotami goes from this being completely downtrodden, abused woman in this caste system, and even within the sort of sexual, within the gender put down as well, of being a woman. She gives birth to a son, and suddenly she is someone. She actually has kudos in the community. She suddenly gets respect. She is someone because she gave birth to a boy. Now, unfortunately, several days after the birth, the boy dies. And she is just bereft, absolutely bereft. Her whole world is collapsed around about her. It's said that she's so distressed that she goes almost mad. She's pulling her hair out, and she's walking around with this dead child held to her bosom, trying to find someone who will bring the child back to life for her. And eventually she meets someone who tells her of the Buddha It says that if she goes to the Buddha might be able to help her. So she tracks the Buddha down, and she goes to him, and she explains her situation. She explains about the death of her son. And the Buddha looks upon her and says, and she says to him, well, can you help me? And the Buddha looks at her and says, yes, I can help you. He says, but first of all, you have to do one thing. And she says, I'll do anything if you can help me. He says, what you need to do is you need to go around the village and bring me back one mustard seed. And she said, well, that's not a problem, I can do that. He said, on the condition that the mustard seed must come from a house which has not known death. So she goes off with the child, and she goes round the village, and she goes from door to door to door. And at each door she asks for a mustard seed, and the people in the houses are delighted to be able to help her and say, yes, we'll give you a mustard. She said, but it's on the condition that this house has not known death. And at each door she is turned away. At each door there has been death in that family. They have known death. Each door closes with them saying, the living are few, the dead are many. So eventually, after going round the village, Kisagotami returns to the Buddha and she says, I understand. And she takes the child, she puts it on a funeral pyre, and she burns it. And at that point, she then prostrates before the Buddha and she calls out the traditional salutation. I'll have to read this in case I forget it. And she says, Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, I go for refuge to the Sangha. And the way that I've been taught Buddhism is that when you meet life and it touches you, you have a response. There is a call in the response. And in my life, in the meeting that I have in Buddhism, that response has been to respond to a teacher who teaches in that way, that is like his response. That was what moved me when I met Buddhism. And to go for refuge to that, I mean, in a very sort of simplistic sort of way, it was basically in my life, what was happening was, I mean, I didn't have a personal sort of path to Damascus sort of thing. There wasn't a sort of sudden bolt of light and something very strong happened. Just very slowly I came in contact with people who were developing qualities of awareness, of compassion. And it was just like, it touched me in a way that I wanted to respond. I never started out thinking that I was going to be a Buddhist. I basically thought I just wanted to be, as I said earlier, a better graphic designer. And to find myself, several years later, actually, saying those sentences myself within the position of my private ordination, it was a long way and it was a long journey which had taken to that point that had convinced me that I had to, or that I wanted to respond in a particular sort of way to my own life experience. So what one does, as far as Sangharakshita has taught me, what one does in going for refuge is one commits oneself to the ideal of Buddhahood, that enlightenment is possible. The Buddha was born as we are born. What the Buddha attained, we too can attain. And the Buddha attained this state where his response to someone's suffering is told in that story. And there is something about that which touches me and moves me so much that I want to be like that. When I was younger, I had heroes, and I was always looking. I wanted to be someone bigger. It's a bit like when I met Buddhism, I kind of met something which I have never yet got to the edges of. I don't even think I understand most of the time what it's about. It's more just a response to something, almost like just a response to warmth or a response to some sort of light. But it's like if I can believe that that there is a state where compassion, and it's an intelligent compassion, is the response to suffering in the world. And I see that in sort of day-to-day activity, even in developing my own awareness, but seeing people around about me involved in Buddhism, then that's what I want to commit myself to. We go for refuge to the Buddha, so it's the ideal of human potential. It's not about giving responsibility up to the Buddha. You don't become a child to the Buddha. If anything, you should learn to think more, to be more alive, to be more in the world. We do that by committing ourselves to the Dharma, which is the teaching that the Buddha gave. And the thing that I always liked about the way they talked about the Dharma was they always said that the Dharma books are not the Dharma. You know, you can quote lists for years. They are not the Dharma. The Dharma is only the Dharma when it is in action, when it is actually coming into the world. Then it is Dharma. Before that, you've got words in books. Until you make it live, it's not Dharma. And you do that in a world where you're trying to create Sangha. So you go for refuge to the Buddha. You commit yourself to the Buddha. You commit yourself to the teachings. And you commit yourself to the Sangha, which is the spiritual fellowship of those who are also trying to develop and change. So in doing that, I mean, I know there are lots of Buddhist traditions. I hadn't met any. The first Buddhist tradition I met was the FWBO. And I stuck with it. I don't know much about other Buddhist traditions. It's one of the things about labels. It's a bit like being gay. You know, you walk into the room, you kind of go, I'm gay, and everybody kind of goes, you've got this baggage next to you called gay, and you're kind of stuck out to the side here. It's very much like being a Buddhist. You know, I walk into a room and say I'm a Buddhist. If I walk into a room and say I'm an order member of the FWBO, it's like suddenly there's this baggage appears right here, and I kind of get pushed out to the side. You know, excuse me. So it's like, in being a Buddhist, quite often I think in introducing myself that I can lose sight of other people, because if somebody says to me they're a Buddhist, I can just instantly assume I know who they are. I instantly assume I know where they're coming from. And it doesn't, and it can actually stop communication. Because I don't want to be a Buddhist. That's not what I want to be. It's not why I'm doing what I'm doing. I know it helps to have labels like that at times, but I think it's only of use if you really understand what the label is and how you're using it. And sometimes I just think it's used quite easily. I went to a thing in London called, it was on HIV and AIDS. It was an interfaith meeting, HIV and AIDS, and it was full of God believers. And there was myself and Maitreya Bandhu, who's the guy who's in this queer faith book, and there's us two with our cases on, and just everyone else believed in God basically, and they were having all these workshops, all these interfaith workshops, discussing what do you do. Well, the one that I went to, I went to the Muslim one because we figured that I should go to the most extremist. So I went to the Muslims, because the thing about the Muslims is at least you knew where you stood with them. You know, they just stone you. So they were just, you know, at least you've got a point for discussion. You know, the Church of England, it's very difficult to kind of find out what it is they're actually saying to you. But the Muslims, you know, you're dead. So we went into this, and they had this whole big discussion. The Muslims and the Christians and the Jews and the Buddhists were having this discussion about what do you do if someone of your faith is ill and they're in hospital. And then they're having all these discussions about a Muslim woman couldn't take water off of, and you just, suddenly all these labels, which are to do with spiritual development, whatever that is, suddenly then just put everybody into rooms where we couldn't actually relate to each other and help each other. And to blow my own trumpet, which I do often enough, I put my hand up amongst all these wacky Christians, and I said, well, don't you just ask the person what they want? And it was like, I don't know if that's allowed. It was like they were so caught up in the labels that they weren't seeing each other. And if Buddhism's anything for me, it is about trying to come into relationship with other people. With various things that have happened in my life, when in the Buddhist context, I've always responded to people who relate to me. Even within the FWBO, there are people who I got on with, or the WBO, there are people who I got on with, and people who I don't get on with. People who relate to me as a person trying to do something. rather than trying to fit me into rules. In the FW, we've got what's called 10 precepts, which are the 10 training principles, which go through body, speech and mind. We've got lots of lists of things you do, but at the end of the day, if they don't help me come into communication with people and actually move me on and help me to change, I don't really work with them. I don't tend to relate to people through lists, and I try not to relate through labels. That's the important thing for me. So, like, coming together in a sort of group of other men who call themselves, I suppose I'd put it around the other way. Don't want to be controversial. I put it Buddhist gays. Because I suppose that's the way I relate to myself first. I didn't get involved in Buddhism through being gay. I got involved in Buddhism through death, basically. I met death when I was young, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I still don't know how to deal with it. The fact that I was gay didn't seem to affect death at all. Death still came into my life. It wasn't anything to do with being gay. It was just there. In a sense, that's why I'm a Buddhist. I want to try and learn how to live in life which has death in it. So that's the sort of path that I am on. And whether the people I'm relating to are gay, or if they're black, or if they're white, or men or women, I suppose that's all the time what I'm looking for in my relationships with other people. I didn't give you any of my talk, actually, so I'll have to do it another time, because I think that's my time up. Okay?
Thanks very much. Wonderful. Questions? Comments?
Something I never understand is take refuge from what?
Well, what I think of when you say that is, I think in that story, when I hear that story and I start to feel myself shake, and I can feel that there is within me, or within that story, there is something I know about the kindness of a response to death.
The mustard seed.
Yeah, the mustard seed. So that's what I would take it from. Because you talk about going for refuge too.
It didn't seem like he gave her refuge. It seemed like he sent her back out and opened her eyes to her own reality, and the fact that everybody shares that what she was going through. It didn't seem like it was a refuge, like going and covering their eyes and being safe. It was more like opening their eyes and going back out. So I never understand that term, taking refuge. Do people ever go toward Buddhism because it feels good and it's fun? Or is it always they're sent there because life has gotten them down and it's been so horrible and they've got to find some way to just avoid it so they go become Buddhists?
Yeah, I'm not a very good example for that myself. I'm seriously tragic. One of the byproducts, I'll go into my meditation teaching, one of the byproducts of meditation and developing awareness is that life, generally, you become happier. You do become happier. I suppose it depends. I suppose this is the idea about understanding in terms of what it's actually about to be a Buddhist. Because as far as a Buddhist is concerned, to actually be in touch with reality is a refuge. The reason why there is so much suffering is because you're not in touch with reality. You forget that you're impermanent. You forget that things are going to change. And it's so difficult to convince yourself of that. I've been losing my hair for about 2-3 years, hasn't bothered me. My teeth, I'm from Scotland, we don't have teeth because we grew up in sweets. But like the biggest thing that's affected me in the past 30, it said in that wee thing I was late 30s, I'm actually mid-30s. But 36, the thing that's worrying me most this year is I'm putting weight on. And this is really shooking my whole view of reality. For years I've had this washboard kind of thing. Now I'm putting weight on. It's like, when does reality actually start coming? I'm actually, after 36 years of doing this and doing that and actually being near death, I'm actually beginning to realise that it's not just, it's actually happening to me. And, what's my response to that? And I have lots of mixed responses to it. But Buddhism says the freedom comes in coming into relationship with reality. Then you let go. Then you're actually really happy. Because your happiness isn't conditional. The Buddha teaches that the reason why most of the time we're not happy is because our happiness is conditional. We don't rely on the right things to make us happy.
That car or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, that's what everybody does. We go for refuge all the time. Basically, everybody goes for refuge all the time. We just go for refuge to different things. You can go for refuge to your career, to your boyfriend, your girlfriend, to your house, to your family. You can go for refuge
from what to all these things?
Well,
what are we running from?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, I suppose if in Buddhism is this thing about not giving up, you're not giving up responsibility. It's starting to understand. Every individual has to start to ask themselves, what is this about? And your motives will always be mixed. But I mean, I suppose I tried drugs, seriously tried drugs. I kept thinking if I got the right combination of drugs, job and boyfriend, that's it. I couldn't do it. You know, maybe I just don't mix a good cocktail, but I just couldn't get it together. Because every time I got to where it was I thought I wanted to be, I kept going, this isn't it. This isn't it. Now why, and I don't think I'm particular in being driven in that sort of way. I mean, I suppose it was death. When I was 17, my mother killed herself. And from being just somebody who was growing up and kind of, I was going to become an engineer, because that's what my father wanted me to do, and I was going to do all these things. Suddenly, it was like, daylight to day. One day, the sky was blue. The next day, I'm told my mother's dead, and I looked up, and the sky was still blue. And there were still people walking about the streets. And it was all still happening. But I couldn't do it anymore. I just didn't know why, anything. Why have a career? I went out and got a career, ran a studio where I was working to earn money so that I could eat out all the time because I was working so hard that I couldn't cook, so that I could pay for the laundromat because I didn't have time to wash up. So it's like, and then why? It was sort of like, I had to make some sense of that really, why that had happened. And that was one of the things. There were several things happened in my life that have kind of got me on that. I just want to know why, because I suppose at the end of the day, I can't find satisfaction in lots of things, so I'm constantly questioning for something else. And I know that through my experience of meditation, and I know at times through communication with people, that I've experienced something which I would call spiritual. I've experienced something which is much more than I am now, much more than my personality. Much bigger, and I've seen people much bigger than their personalities. So it's like for me, it started a journey. But I suppose my response to life was I did close down. I tried everything to make myself unconscious rather than conscious, and it didn't work. Luckily, I got out before. I kind of didn't manage to talk myself, so I kind of got out of that. There's always the possibility there of topping yourself. When you've got suicide in your background, it's always, when the going gets tough, kill yourself. Why not? What is there to live for? And that's the sort of question. Why live? There's a question there. And the bits that I'm not a great studier because there's a little for me goes a long way. But there's things like, the Buddha taught that his teaching is a taste of freedom. What does that mean? It sounds really good to put in your talks, but what does it actually mean to feel free? And that I think becomes for me, that's what Buddhist is about. It's actually starting to look at this thing. Yeah, what does it mean? Go for refuge to what? What am I running away from? What am I looking for? Is this it?
You said you started out as a graphic designer, so I assume that your creative self, aside from your career ambitions, was an authentic part of yourself. My question is, what do you do with that creativity now that it doesn't have the same outlet?
It's a good question. That part of my psyche is always going, what about me? Well, last year I went into drag for the first time ever. I still use it. I mean, I suppose I don't use it one of the reasons why I kind of actually gave up the graphic design was because I got fed up suing people. You know, it was all very well when you went to the job, people loved you, but when it came to get the money off, I was like, and so, you know, excuse me, I'm creative. I don't deal with, you know, I just do the shimmying around going blue, green, you know. I don't do all this hard-nosed business stuff. And then I went and studied theatre design. I did that, and that was really interesting. Got into the theatre and thought, no, I don't want to do this either. And now what I do is I do work around the movement. I worked as a graphic designer for the movement for a while, and I do interior design now for the movement. But basically as a consultant, because my whole idea as well about one of the reasons why I wanted to be a graphic designer is because I just thought it was so sexy. You know, you get all this sort of shimming around all the time. Whereas nowadays, what I prefer to do is I prefer to work, and the reason I went into theatre is I prefer to work with people to create something collectively. That's what turns me on. To be part of a family, you know, to be part of something, getting something on. So nowadays, what I tend to do is I just tend to help people who don't know anything about interior design, or they've got ideas about how they want their centres to be, and I kind of go and show them how to do it. But it's not my design in a sense. So that's how I outlet it. And also I have got into performance. I mean, I did this drag show last year, which brought out the Scottish Queen within, really. Who and this will get really complicated, my other mother, I've got lots of mothers, my other mother said is actually my grandmother, my biological grandmother. So she's about. But I'm doing a lot more diverse things now creatively than I did when I was a graphic designer. So it's still there. Teaching is very creative as well. Teaching meditation.
David, you
just a couple of points and questions. One is taking refuge has always meant to me to set a taproot down into a taproot.
Right.
The tree needs a root that really goes deep and gets the true, water.
Yeah.
And in a sense, the tree doesn't go anywhere. It's not refuge from. The tree remains where it was planted in the world that it came into, but it takes refuge and gets nourished by the truth. So that's what I said. Okay, and the other thing I wanted to, my understanding has always been that the Buddhist and Buddhism is really, as a term, it's really a Western creation.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Our tradition of naming the religion after the Mohammedanism, Christianity, it's always about the founder of the religion, Zoroastrianism. But that's not the way they refer to themselves in most countries. They're followers of the way.
Yeah.
And that's much easier to take because just the word itself conjures up, well, what's my relationship to this historical Buddha? Is he a god? Is he a person? All those questions can't even be, you can't get away with them, away from them, until you give up that term altogether to say, I'm a follower of the way.
With almost everything, what Buddhism does all the time, it always kind of basically says, whatever your motivation can make something good, positive, or negative, can make it creative or reactive. So like, you might be able to actually make your practice to reflect on what Buddhism is. That might be useful to you, or it might not. I mean, that's the sort of thing about Buddhism. It's always like, what your motivation is, we'll seek out. If you're seeking out the truth, you will find it in whichever way you do it. But our full title, my full title is Dharmachari, which is he who fares in the Dharma, Nagaraja, Dragon King.
Any other questions? We're short on time. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.